So good afternoon. My name is Grace Johnson, and I'm part of the Alumni and Family Engagement team on campus. We are very excited that you're joining us today as we feature the final art discussion we have planned in this series that was created specifically due to COVID-19 as a way to keep us all connected as we stay at home. Pitzer College Art Galleries has been an important partner to us in developing this series for alumni, parents, family, faculty, staff, as we are all one Pitzer community. I'd now like to introduce you, as many of you already know, Kiara, who has been the curator and director of Pitzer College Art Galleries since 2007. Is that correct?
Yep.
And we're just very grateful to her and Chris and their willingness to partner with us for this very special community engagement opportunity.
My name is Kira Ennis. I'm the director of Pitzer College Art Galleries, and I'd like to welcome you to the 4th edition of Stay at Home with Pitzer College Art Galleries. Before going ahead, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd also like to thank the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement for partnering with us, and special thanks to Chris Michner, Exhibitions and Communications Manager, for all of his help in coordinating and promoting these events. During the Stay at Home series, we are revisiting a number of exhibitions that have had considerable impact on our campus, as well as further afield, due to their compelling nature. For our 4th one, Elana Mann, who exhibited here in the fall of 2018, will discuss her exhibition, Instruments of Accountability, which was both politically resonant and visually spectacular. In addition to taking place in the galleries, it also extended into the surrounding public spaces, enacted through performances with students and in collaboration with Los Angeles-based artists. Additionally, one part of the exhibition took the form of a sound work that utilized Pitzer's clock tower. Today, Elana will be discussing all of this, as well as the role that collaboration has in her practice, which is critical to everything she does. Before going ahead, I'd like to recognize Professor Tim Berg and thank him for all his help with this exhibition. Much of the work made for the show was created during Elana's residency in the ceramics department here at Pitzer and with Tim's assistance. The conversation will last approximately 50 minutes and will be followed by 10 minutes of questions from you. If you'd like to ask a question, please send it along to me via chat, and I will pass it along to Elana. Thank you, and please join me in welcoming Elana Mann.
Thank you. Thanks, Kira, so much. And I'm so happy to be with all of you, so thanks for coming. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm exploring the Zoom universe, and so please excuse any clumsiness in the lecture. My artwork seeks to bring consciousness to the speaking and listening that we practice in everyday life, with the goal of fostering greater justice, equity, and empathy in our world. And currently, we're enduring this worldwide pandemic. Many of us are practicing social and physical distancing, and we're facing this particularly unique time for speaking and listening. And although humankind has endured pandemics and various kinds of quarantine before, never has our communication been so mediated. Back in 2010, in a moment of psychic artistic intuition, I fashioned this satellite dish hat to my head and created an artwork called ENN, or Eternal Network News, where I live streamed myself Skyping artists from around the world. And nowadays, for those of us that are privileged and able to stay home during this time of quarantine, we are in an eternal ENN state. So as I speak to you today, if it delights you, you can imagine me teleporting to you through my punch bowl hat. And here we go. Whoop. Okay, sorry. Today I'm going to talk about, as Kira mentioned, my exhibition, Instruments of Accountability. Instruments of Accountability was a vortex of objects, musical scores, and actions that extended from the gallery walls to the outside world. It included art objects along with performances on the Claremont College's campus, collaboration with many different people, participatory sound works, and protests internationally. I wanted to start by describing a bit about the research and making processes that preceded the Instruments of Accountability exhibition. In 2012, I was researching the history of listening devices, and I came upon this drawing by 17th century Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher. In this image, which I had hanging up in my studio wall for many years, you can see a hypothetical sound portal stemming from a sculptural bust on the right and expanding through architectural scale to a courtyard below. This image captivated me because I just loved the idea of sound traveling mysteriously through walls, through intimate space to public space, expanding from personal or interpersonal to political. Like Kircher, I'm fascinated with sound and space. I was trained as a sculptor, so my inclination is to think of the physical and embodied aspects of listening and sound. And this exhibition at Pitzer had a lot of coincidences. So when I first met with Kira in 2017 about working together on the exhibition, she saw this image on my studio wall and told me that she was also researching Kircher and writing about him. And so it was this kismet, perfect situation where we could both explore our years-long obsession with Kircher. Kircher is credited for having invented the modern-day megaphone, but he was also a mystic, and his sonic diagrams really echo sacred geometries such as mandalas, Islamic geometric patterns, and yantras. Although many of his many publications, they cover a variety of topics, he published 2 books specifically about sound that included musical scores, architectural drawings like the one I showed you, diagrams, and also just speculations about how the physics of sound works. And these 2 books, which are extremely rare and hard to access, are actually in the collection of Claremont College's library. So I was able to access them while I was preparing for my exhibit. And the diagram on the right that you see, it's meant to map the interior sonic spaces of a snail shell. Oops. For the past 6 years, I've been making sculptures that synthesize casts of the human body with musical instruments. And these explore themes of blame, of silencing, and of the resiliency of the human voice and spirit. I make a lot of drawings and sketches when I'm first thinking about my sculptures. And this one is called the Blame Game Rattle, which I began to think about after an argument I had with a family member over the state of Israel. I was thinking about the way blame oftentimes implicates the blamer as much as the person or thing being blamed. So who we blame or how we blame reveals our own intimate ideologies, our own biases, and our own backgrounds. Blame functions sometimes like a boomerang, or this sphere here, with fingers pointing towards something or someone that can also point back at the accuser. And in so many situations, it's hard to know where to place blame. I wanted my sculpture to function like a maraca that makes sounds once you shake it. And the fingers wouldn't wag per se because they would be fixed in place, but they would move in space, evoking finger pointing when you played the rattle. Here you can see the process of creating my blame game rattle from bottom left clockwise. And like Kira mentioned, around the time I was developing the piece, I was really fortunate to be invited as the first artist in residence at Pitzer College's ceramics department. So under the tutelage and mentorship of the ever generous and brilliant Tim Berg and Rebecca Myers, I developed a process to create my pieces, and I'm so indebted to them for helping me with this work. I cast the pointer finger of 22 people. Everyone that I cast were all people that had particular resonance to me in relation to the theme of blaming or the action of pointing things out. And I learned how to do slip casting, which is a special type of casting with liquid clay. The sculptural instruments I make are extremely labor intensive and time intensive, and they usually take 1 to 3 years to finish. But a few years is really just a blink of an eye when you think about how long it takes to develop musical instruments, some of which are developed over centuries or millennia. So my sculptural instruments are really prototypes. They work provisionally. They're not perfect in sound or material or form. They're made with what I have for the moment on hand. And I think about them as similar to folk musical instruments, which inherently have the political history of a time and place embedded in their form or function. So here's a completed piece from the Blame Game Rattle series. As I was creating the rattle, I began to contemplate all the different aspects of blame, which dictated the design of each rattle. I placed fingers in different directions with different bass structures and created different sounds for each one. And they were filled with glass beads and ceramic beads. They were supposed to represent many aspects of blame, people coming together to blame someone or something, two sides diametrically opposed to one another, and one even had fingers pointed towards the heavens, referencing how moral and ethical judgments often come from a deeply spiritual place. And I made 13 different designs, 6 of which were displayed in the final exhibition. I began to think more deeply about the culture of blame in our society, the us versus them mentality, and about the reach of our communication technology. So the endless news cycles, social media, blogs, and the way this eternal network can really harness shaming, bullying, trolling towards an individual or group to such an extent that someone's life can literally be marked forever. On the flip side, naming a perpetrator and a negative aspect of culture can just be so productive. And recently there's been this opening of space for voices of survivors that haven't had the courage or their opportunity to be heard before. So think about the Me Too or Time's Up movements and how much they have shifted paradigms around sexual assault and sexual abuse. Predators like Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, and scores more have been identified and publicly prosecuted. So the power to speak up and speak out against injustice, violence, bigotry, misogyny, racism, eco-violence, all of this is so vital to creating a more peaceful world. And this rattle right here was made with the casts of 15 fingers from women-identified bodies, all pointing in solidarity and unity. These sculptures, all of them, are participatory, and visitors are encouraged to pick them up and play them in the space of a gallery, enlivening an otherwise socially stunted space. And this aspect of my sculpture has really made me think a lot right now because of this time where, you know, COVID-19 is so spreadable. How do these sculptures function right now when, you know, participation really should not happen? So that's been a puzzler. The rattles, when they're displayed, are mounted in front of Athanasius Kircher's diagrams. And Kircher was using these diagrams to map how sound travels through space, but to me, the diagrams also mirror the way sounds travel through social space. So how can sound affect a group or community? How can power be distributed through a political space? And by placing them inside these diagrams, I'm suggesting how the sounds of the rattles could function in spaces beyond the gallery walls, and also suggesting a sacred use for them. A lot of people ask me what's drawn me to sound, music, and listening, because it's very unusual for visual artists to be interested in the non-visual, the sonic. And I also have no real formal musical training, but I grew up in a culture which is very suspicious of visuality. I'm from a Jewish family. And in Judaism, there's even laws against certain types of visual representation. It's a very textual culture that's a very spoken culture. And so it's really no wonder that there's a history of radical artists with Jewish backgrounds. Since the visual is suspect rather than sacred, we are free to break all the rules. Facing the blame game rattles was this mega kazoo horn, which I found on a dusty shelf at the Claremont Folk Music Center, a store and community space and museum located just a few miles from the Claremont College's campuses. The horn was originally made in the 1970s. It's 10 feet long, and it was fashioned after a Tibetan horn, which are ritualistic Buddhist and Mongolian instruments. But unlike the Tibetan horn, which is meant for one person, the mega kazoo horn was played by multiple people, up to 6, who would activate the horn in demonstrations and protests. And you can see the little spouts on the left and right side of the horn for people to play it. And this is how I found the mega kazoo horn, which is a lesson to always look on the dusty shelves around you for treasures of history. It was conceived and created by the founder of the Claremont Folk Music Center, who was this incredible man, Charles Chase, an active socialist who would bring the instrument out for May Day celebrations and other actions. And the horn had siren whistles. So if you can imagine those whistles that go like police or fire sirens, stemming from the main shaft. And it's incredibly loud when it's played. I actually didn't even know that it was still functional until some Pitzer College students tried using it just spontaneously, which was a total delight. And this mega kazoo horn is really part of a lineage of handmade protest sound objects in which I envision my sculptures also residing. Another coincidence of this exhibition was that I was making my own kazoos when I found the mega kazoo horn. And so I was able to display these 2 objects facing each other. On the left-hand side of this image is a sculptural structure holding 10 of my custom kazoos. And on a Kircher sonic diagram base. And behind the kazoos is a score that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. The kazoo is a merleton. It's a vibraphone, and it's one of the oldest instruments in existence. It was first made in Africa. And although we see kazoos as a children's toy nowadays, it was originally used as a sophisticated way to disguise a speaker's voice like a sonic mask. The exterior of my kazoo is plastic and the interior is metal, and it was made from the cast thumb and pointer finger of my father. The sculpture speaks to the seemingly impenetrable space between people, even or especially the people who you are most intimate with. All the instruments I make are easy to play and transport, so they can be shown in a gallery, they can be played in a music venue, or used in a street protest. At the basic level, I just want to be able to play them myself. And I also want to encourage a greater experimental and expressive noise in the world. I often collaborate with musicians who have worked with my instruments in a variety of ways. These three musicians are holding up a sculpture called Hands Up, Don't Shoot Horn. And this sculptural instrument was originally used in an opera called Unseal Unseen by composers Michaela Tobin and Sharon Cho-hee Kim, who are pictured here. Michaela is the farthest figure to the right, and Sharon is at the center figure. And this opera premiered in Los Angeles in 2017. The sculptures have a hole in the palm of the hand, which connects to an interior chamber and ends in a bell. So they function like a megaphone, amplifying your voice. The opera in which the sculpture was used was about violence against women. And the sculptures were used in a piece called Silent Room. And that's the musical score that is blown up in back of these figures. Kim Tobin and another vocalist performed this score during the opening week of the Instruments of Accountability exhibition, which, as the third coincidence, was the week of the Dr. Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh hearings. So they were performing a piece about sexual violence while we were watching hearings where Dr. Ford was testifying to Congress about an incident during her teenage years when she alleged she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh. And this was before he was confirmed to the Supreme Court. In one of the most vivid moments of her testimony, she describes when she tried to scream and Brett Kavanaugh covered her mouth so no one would hear her. She says she thought she was going to die. In the performance of Silent Room, which was made years before the Kavanaugh hearings, there were moments where the performers were screaming and covering their mouths. And so there was this really chilling and cathartic moment of art mirroring life and life mirroring art. For the exhibition, I commissioned 4 new musical scores written specifically for my instruments. And in fact, Kira and her partner wrote one of the scores. I was very honored that they did that. These scores were displayed in the gallery alongside the other pieces. The composition on the left was created by poet and librettist Douglas Kearney. And in his score, Kearney creates a constellation of African-American culture dealing with issues of racial injustice and inequity. And he references different songs like We Shall Overcome and Fight the Power, Keep On, musicians like Andrew Benjamin, Beyonce, Kendrick Lamar. And you can see this Fight the Power fist that he creates in his composition. The piece on the right is by composer A.J. Layagi. It's a very baroquely dense musical piece with really highly complex and concentrated notation for the piano. And this was this style of composition, which found its heyday during the heights of the colonial period, and superimposed onto the musical notations. AJ has collected anti-colonial or post-colonial text to be sung or spoken aloud while playing the piece with my rattles. And AJ also performed this piece during the opening reception. This was another score created by composer Dana Reason, also for the Blame Game Rattles. And she was thinking of female fencing. So you can see the position, these women jousting on the staff lines, dancing and gesturing. And it really, this composition really evolved my thinking about the rattles, which began to resemble medieval weapons like maces. One of the scores that was included in the exhibition was a historical piece by the musician and composer Pauline Oliveros, who has had a huge influence on me. Oliveros was a queer Tejana experimental composer who was born in 1932 and passed away in 2016. She pioneered a practice she calls deep listening after witnessing a Vietnam War protester set himself on fire on the University of California, San Diego campus in the late 1960s. She developed this practice as a way to seek and spread healing. She once described deep listening as listen to everything all the time and remind yourself when you are not listening. So just take a minute to imagine the radical openness that one must undertake in order to carry out Oliveros' vision. This means you cannot tune out voices you don't like, voices that are completely in opposition to you, voices you feel like are dangerous, are full of hatred, voices that spread lies. And I was reminded about the power of this deep listening act recently by my friend and colleague Dorit Sippies, who talks about the limits of one's own empathy as being the limits of one's own self-knowledge, one's own ability to listen. Listening to everything all the time reveals our own limits, our own triggers, our own shortfalls. It is a space that contains the possibility of infinite growth. The Oliveros score I included in Instruments of Accountability is called the Grand Buddha Marching Band. The score outlines a ragtag marching band performance that is really the exact opposite of any marching band experience that I have ever witnessed or participated in. Rather than a typical military-inspired display where everyone is in lockstep coordination, there are no specified notes, no steps, no instruments. There's not even coordinated costumes, but individual choice reigns supreme. So participants can wear whatever they want. They can make whatever sounds they want. They can play anything that makes noise or make no sound at all. The one thing that Oliveros does specify is that a drum major keeps time, whatever sort of flexible time space she or he deem appropriate. And she outlines a formation, this mandala spiral that you can see on top, which also reminds me of Kierkegaard's sonic diagrams and mimics the shape of the cochlea, the spiral part of the inner ear that transforms sound into neural signals. I love how Oliveros' piece celebrates democracy and talks about how everyone has freedom to be an individual, but is responsible and accountable to a group. These are the ideals of democracy. And so I organized a performance of her piece on the day of the 2018 midterm elections, and Pitzer College Art Galleries designed this flyer. We distributed them all over the Claremont College's campus and the surrounding area. It's really hard to remember back to this time because current events are just so consuming, but the 2018 election was really an important moment when many in the United States really took responsibility for their own role as a citizen and took part in the election by canvassing, phone banking, signing up people to vote, and so on. And I had done some of that work as well. So when, as November 6th was approaching, I really wanted to create a festive atmosphere that would be like a healing moment in the midst of all this political madness. And Oliveros states, the attitude for the march is joyful and celebratory. The motivation for the sound making is to create beneficial energy for everyone. So here's an image of the performance with the drum major in the center. And the experience of the piece was really fascinating, as all performances of Pauline Oliveros always are. The score revealed the inherent power of groups. So most of the participants felt comfortable, confident, and supported when the spiral was tight and concentrated. But as the spiral grew larger and participants dispersed further and further from one another, they began to feel vulnerable, uncomfortable, and lonely. This was the first time I had the opportunity to use the blame game rattles in a performance. And I always learned so much about my sculptural instruments through using them. The meaning of the sculptures that I make are really in flux. They grow and change over time as I employ them more and more. For example, I learned that using the rattles was really liberating for people that were inhibited to speak or didn't know what to say. So instead of having the pressure to use their voice, they could just shake this very loud rattle. In the exhibition design, the bottom part of the main gallery had sculptural displays and scores, while the top level, which you can see as a balcony, has more activist and directly participatory works. So the sound of the exhibition traveled up and out from the instruments to the surrounding world. I collaborated on 2 posters with Tomorrow Girls Troupe, a feminist activist artist collective that works on gender equity issues in East Asia, and they concentrate on issues in Japan and Korea. Tomorrow Girls Troupe, or TGT, has been instrumental in changing sexual abuse laws in Japan, altering sexist dictionary definitions, and spearheading other powerful cultural shifting campaigns. They're an anonymous global collective of around 50 people, and they communicate through a secret Facebook group, making most of their decisions by consensus. Working with activists is very specific, as there is an emphasis on utility and function, which aren't factors that artists typically think about. And I find this shift in perspective to be really important for the work that I do. I enjoy offering my efforts towards direct social political aims and working towards a specific result, but it's also hard to work with activists because making art is really slow and politics changes so fast. So you have to really be on your toes and flexible and be able to move quickly as things evolve. So the poster might look really straightforward, but it was difficult to make. Even finding a Japanese or Japanese American woman who would be willing to pose for the image took months. TGT members hide their identities and wear masks because there's so much backlash against their work. It's not even safe for them to be known public figures in Japan and China, so they take on pseudonyms. And you can see them, one of the members in this mask here. Also finding a slogan that would work in English and Japanese and that we could all agree on was difficult, not just because of language, but also because of the differences in sexual politics. So we ended up using this 1976 campaign slogan by Tennessee Congresswoman Annabelle Clement O'Brien, "A woman's place is in the House and the Senate," with the Japanese version being "gender equality at home and in politics." And we finished these posters the summer before the 2018 midterm elections, when more women ran and were elected to Congress than ever before. We began our collaboration by asking, why are President Trump and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe so close? And then we did a lot of research to compare and contrast what was happening within American and Japanese politics around issues of gender. We discovered this through line of patriarchal worldviews and misogynist policies of our leaders. So in Japan, Abe is constantly trying to change the constitution to take away the rights of women and the LGBTQI community, while Trump has already done a lot of those things. And we displayed some of our research on the wall, and it was just really perfect in this educational setting to have this pedagogical display. The process of research and learning really revealed the differences, the different lived experiences between Japanese and American women. And these different lived experiences really showed how important cross-cultural dialogue, collaboration, and systems of support are. The poster that TGT and I created together has been used in multiple demonstrations, and here are images from one in Osaka, Japan on April 10th, 2019. This is a yearly event to mark the day in 1946 when Japanese women voted for the first time in an election. The demonstration, which took place before national elections in Japan, was organized by a group called Parité 50-50. And they're agitating for a new law mandating that Japanese politicians be half female and half male. And certainly we could benefit from that sort of law as well. Alongside my work with TGT, I displayed this participatory sonic piece, which had the form of an installation including graphics. And you can see there's a telephone mounted to the gallery wall in the center. During my time as an artist in residence at Pitzer College's ceramics department, the year before I mounted this exhibition, I started thinking about the campus as a giant sound vessel. In the center of campus, for those who don't know, there is a circle that's surrounded by trees, and there's a rock display, and it kind of is, it's like a hole in the ground, so it's a recession. And this to me was like a giant speaker or a giant sound space. So I wanted to activate this idea of the sonic space of Pitzer College's campus through the exhibition. Eventually, I decided to infuse the campus with recordings through a collaboration with a gallery called 323 Projects, which exists only through dialing a phone number. So people access the gallery through either this phone installed on the wall, or they called the number with their own cell phones. And during each phone call, each participant recorded her or his answer to the question, what if women were in charge, through a message machine. We also created these pull-away flyers and mounted them around Pitzer College's campus, as well as other college campuses in the Los Angeles region. And thinking about this question, what if women were in charge, it can be seen by some as flat-footed and simplistic, because what does in charge mean? Why set up this power binary in the first place? But really, I wanted to challenge the dynamics of gender and power, and this question raises these issues very directly. At a time right now when women's rights are under siege, along with the rights of so many minority and marginalized groups in the US, pointing out where power lies and trying to think through how to dismantle our whole broken system is really vital. So yes, who is in charge matters very much right now. And we can certainly see that during the pandemic. Selected messages were compiled into a sound piece, and this was played hourly through loudspeakers located in the giant clock tower here in the middle of campus. The answers were fascinating and varied dramatically, as you can imagine. Some people were quite defensive, saying that in their household, women were already in charge, while others said, and I quote, "If women were in charge, you wouldn't know it because they would empower everybody." And still others felt as if power corrupts, no matter who yields it. One person suggested that the only thing that would change was that society would be organized more cyclically rather than linearly. What was clear, though, throughout all the answers is that patriarchy's stronghold is alive and well in America. And we actually created a catalog for the exhibition that has many of the answers to this question. And if you're interested in the catalog, you can get in touch with myself or Kira. Thinking about this exhibition right now during COVID-19 has been like looking through a window into another parallel universe. Instruments of Accountability was predicated on participation, on touch, on collective sound making, and in group listening where everyone's together physically. And all of these activities right now are banned, they're prohibited, or they're dangerous to human survival. So what does that leave us? Well, ultimately, these ideas and values of touch, of collectivity, of participation, of listening, these are still very, very important now as much as ever. And the loss of them will really lead to mass destruction of our natural and social world. So in ending, I wanted to read this quote by Barbara London, who is a famed economist and theorist. And I recently found this quote on a Sister Corita Kent poster. London writes in 1982, and I quote, "We are either going to become a community or we are going to die." And I feel like that is just so resonant right now. And on that happy note, just to end with smiles, I'm going to end my lecture and open it up to your questions and thoughts. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay. So now's a time where you are welcome to just ask any questions that you have, or thoughts too. You can also just share things that you were thinking while I was talking.
Does anybody have any questions for Elana, either about this particular exhibition or about other work that she has done, or even perhaps work that is percolating right now? Perhaps that's a good place to start. Elana.
Well, I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. I thought it's very powerful, especially the piece where the women have the instruments over their mouths, and how you describe what was going on at the time. And for a lot of people who've experienced abuse, you know, that hand in front of the mouth is very significant. So I thought, wow, with no words, it's just so powerful, the way it was described.
Thank you. Yeah, it was such a fascinating thing to be installing the exhibition the week of these hearings. So I'm, you know, listening and watching to them, and so much of these issues of blaming and voicing were happening in real life, in real time. And the other thing that was happening in my life was that what was playing out nationally was also happening in my own artistic community, where the director of a sculpture park that I had been in residence at many years ago had been accused of sexual predatory action. So yeah, these national cases are also kind of echo very local and personal experiences that you talk about.
I remember, Elana, I remember I think I might have showed it to you, the cover of the New Yorker during the Kavanaugh hearings. Did people see that cover? It was a black, I think it was black and white of this woman's face. I think it was probably an illustration, And then there was red lipstick, but it was done in such a way that her mouth was being covered. I think I remember showing that to you because it was so evocative of what, you'd been doing.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. Yeah.
I think Professor Timberg has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for that talk, Elana. It was so great. You talked about all the various collaboration that you were involved with in this exhibition and other work that you've created. And I was just thinking about how some of that took place online or virtually in order to make tangible actions happen, and thinking about how sociable you are as a person and how you seem to thrive so much on those interactions with other people and making and working together and just talking and enjoying meals and all the things we got to do when you were artist in residence. And I was wondering if your ability to collaborate has changed, or what challenges have you faced, but also what opportunities have you found in this time using technology or just creating a sense of community or collaboration that is different than what you've done before?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Thank you so much. So I'm very much in the middle of processing everything, what's happening. And I am also starting some collaborations now as well. I think that I miss people a lot, but I am surrounded by my family of 4, and so there's a lot of there's a lot of human interaction that happens domestically right now. But yeah, it's really made me think a lot about my own work, which has brought people together and involves people, and how to keep that going. So one thing I'm doing right now, for example, is I'm doing a score exchange with a friend of mine. It's just a very simple thing, but we send each other performances to do, and that has been just a very nice, intimate thing for me to think about and do in my daily life. And I've also been involved in like a lot of, as many as I can, kind of Zoom gatherings and Zoom conversations. There's so many of those happening. But yeah, I mean, it's also a time right now where I'm finding it to be a very difficult time to work and get a lot of stuff done. Not just because of my family's needs, but also because of how rapidly things are changing. And although there's a quietness to my home space, there's a noisiness to my mind. And so I have also been using this time to read and to think and to just be as well. So yeah, pause and listen. Thank you.
We have about 5 more minutes. If anybody would like to ask Elana a question or make a comment or anything. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add?
I guess I would just follow up on my question. One of the things I was thinking about was whether there's a space or how to create a space for maybe visual art or experiential art that other people don't have access to. And so thinking about your performance or that exchange that you were describing, and whether or not many people could perform that in the intimacy of their own homes at the same time and feel connected, but not see the connection necessarily. You know what I mean? Like that there's these opportunities for things that are less visual potentially, but
Yeah.
nonetheless have an impact on a larger community.
Yeah. So recently this, yeah, I mean, really great points. And definitely things I've been thinking about recently. This artist, or he's an opera director, musician, composer, artist. He created a performance of one of Pauline Oliveros' pieces that had like hundreds of participants that were doing it together live on Zoom. You could stream it from your home. And it was also a fundraiser for musicians right now that are really struggling. And I tuned into it. I think part of the issue, which my parents actually pointed out when we were talking about singing together via this technology, is that there's a time lapse. So that I mean, with Pauline's piece, I don't think it mattered that much, but if you're going to like karaoke with friends or whatever, it really does matter. So, I mean, there's so much to explore. There's so much to explore for sure. And I think there's so much potential. One thing I've been thinking about a lot is getting in touch with like the cystic fibrosis community and just understanding like how do they connect still with other people, because they're not able to be with other people. Like they've developed probably sophisticated ways of being together virtually that I don't know about. Also, there's like all these hand signals that I'm learning that I'm like, wow, they're actually really effective, like empathy hands. You know, that, you know, I feel like that is another just like realization of like different ways to listen through hand gestures in virtual space. So the deaf community too, I feel like could really, you know, has so much to teach us in that way too. So yeah, I think this is all fascinating. Like I said, I move so slowly, so I'm just beginning to kind of wrap my brain around what that means. But certainly other artists are really exploring this rich realm as well.
So I think, thank you so much for.
Okay.
I think we have a comment, sorry, just before, was that Gina? Just before Gina.
Yeah, it was.
If you could hold on one sec, because we have
Sorry.
hi Gina, we have somebody who was just before you, who Bell Man, and then we'll follow with you, Gina. I just be mindful that I think the Zoom conversation will end at exactly 4 o'clock. Is
Okay,
that
so
right,
we have
Grace?
like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
so I'll be quick. I really appreciate, Elana, how in all of your work, this is stretching back too, that you look at communication verbally and non-verbally. And that people who don't want to, who aren't comfortable with expressing themselves in words are able to do it in other ways. And you know, and you mentioned that in your Grand Buddha marching band, but I think that it's much deeper as you've been doing art. So I just want to comment on that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Gina?
Oh, hi. So actually it was kind of touching on that because Elana, you do a lot of work with communication. And I remember I've even said I thought you were a great communicator like many times. And I just noticed, like, because we're in this whole world that's essentially about communication and being trapped in, or, you know, disassociated from other people, I just really see this as like, maybe you're not creating something right now, but like this has to be something that could be feeding future work. I don't know, like, are you seeing anything that inspires you, like, through communication?
Yeah, I like I said, I have these hand gestures and these ways of communicating. I just read an article by a deaf mother that was talking about communication with her hearing child. So yeah, this time is very confusing and very rich for me, as well as for all of you. So thank you so much for your questions and your comments. Thanks for listening and for being here with me.
Thank you so much, Elana. Really, really fabulous. Hope to see you
Thank
soon.
you.
All right,
Okay,
bye.
bye.